Welcome to Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags. In this episode, it's Mike Seaver. Well, his real name is Kirk Cameron. You might know him as Mike Seaver from Growing Pains for 7 years in the 80s and 1990s. He's still acting, but he has certainly said, I'm not afraid to say who I am. I'm not afraid to show my virtue, my religion, my belief system. And he's a guy that started as an atheist and then found Jesus. We're going to break it down with Kirk Cameron. Here's a preview. You said you didn't want to be an actor. How does it happen?
Well, I was just a normal little kid with my three younger sisters living in an apartment in the suburbs of Los Angeles. And my mom was best friends with a lady whose son was on a show called Eight is Enough back in the 1980s. And she said, hey, you ought to go down and see this agent. Take your kids. Maybe some of them will be able to do a TV commercial or maybe get on a TV show.
The value system was disgusting and sordid and seedy and underhanded. How do you rise above that knowing, because as you get older, I'm guessing 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, you're going, wow, these people are nasty. These people are like the lowest form, some of them, who want to, profit off of pornography or want to somehow expose children to things they shouldn't be exposed to. How do you make that realization, and how do you make that realization and say to yourself, I have to step away from this. I can't be part of this?
Yeah, I'm not that smart. I'm not a genius to have figured these things out. In fact, I don't even believe that I saved myself when it comes to finding God and rescuing myself from the typical demise of most teenage actors. Someone smarter than me, my pastor at the time, told me, he said, Kirk, remember, you didn't find God. He wasn't lost. You were, and he found you.
What happens to where you go from, I don't believe in anything, to Jesus is my beacon? How does that happen?
Yeah, I like the way that you phrase that. Every teenager's got temptation on this side and temptation on this side. It's a pretty girl over here and it's a beer over here. And, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Right.
No matter which way you turn, you're going to get in trouble.
Is this out now? When can we get it? How do we get involved? What do we need to know about it?
Yeah. If I were the devil, I would take over Disney and just corrupt the minds of little kids.
Yes.
Right. And so what I've decided to do is that if I want to represent the good side, then I need to produce television programs that represent what is about faith, hope, and love. And that's what you're going to find at Brave Plus. It's not only my show, Iggy and Mr. Kirk, but over 50 shows that have been vetted by the team at Brave Plus to make sure that they're not overstimulating for your kids and going to make their ADD worse. They're not going to just confuse your children about gender, about their identity, and all that. These are good shows, classic shows like Bob the Builder, like Strawberry Shortcake, Davy and Goliath. I remember watching that show as a little kid. We've got my show, and new shows are being added all the time. It's just like Netflix. It's a network that you can go to and see shows that have been vetted by parents. Only 1 out of 20 shows make the cut. And so you can trust that they're going to be good for your kids and reinforce the moral values that you're trying to teach them. If you were trying to take down any nation, and particularly the West in America, the two big strongholds, the pillars of strength, are just what our founding fathers said that they were. These are the things we must protect above all things: faith and morality. George Washington said they're the two indispensable supports without which our nation cannot stand. Right. And so, yeah, if I were the devil and I had, no matter where I live, China or North Korea or anybody else, and I wanted to take down America, I would go after the family and I would go after the church. Those are the two strengths that have created our culture.
Why didn't Hollywood realize that what you're launching now was necessary? We know that that Generation Z, in larger numbers than we've seen in a long time, is turning to Christianity. We know that a lot of them voted for President Trump because they wanted conservatism back in the White House and central government. They wanted more freedom, fewer regulations and smaller government. Why didn't Hollywood realize that? They seem to be pretty good predictors of what the trends are. Why didn't they realize that with all the smut they're pushing, if they pushed a very holy or a very family-friendly the agenda, they might have profited big time. There are people who are dying to get the programming, the books, all the stuff that you're presenting now, and Hollywood didn't seem to see it coming. Why don't you think they saw this?
Well, it's mostly because because they don't want to see it, and because it makes them feel guilty, and because they're already getting paid by the sickos on the other side. So it's like, do you know somebody in your personal life, you got a friend, and it's like, no matter how much you show them the evidence of the truth, no matter how much you demonstrate to them that, diving into porn and alcohol and extortion, although it may be fun for you, is not going to take you down a road that gets you where you want to be.
What happens when a former TV news anchor joins the other side and starts a campaign to tell the truth? Well, the left freaks out and does everything it can to shut him up. They swatted him. They condemned him on social media. They did everything they could to silence him. It didn't work.
Your show's a big hit. It's a big success. You do fantastically. Your ratings are great, and we're very proud of you.
This is Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags.
A complete generation and then some still knows him as Mike Seaver, but he's certainly much more complicated than that. And he's a guy he didn't fall into the Hollywood stereotypes, which I love. It's Kirk Cameron. Kirk, how are you? Good to see you again.
Hey, I'm doing great, but you're right. I'm way more complicated than that.
You are, but let me fill you in. My sister Monica, who books you, and you know Monica now, she freaked out the first time she got to talk to you because she's of the generation that grew up knowing you as Mike Seaver. They grew up knowing you as that character on that show. And I think I've asked you this before. How much of that was actually you? Was that a completely different character for you, almost a different personality, or was a lot of Kirk Cameron in what we saw on the screen?
No, there was no acting magic for Mike Seaver when I first started. I never even wanted to be an actor, so I don't even think I was a very good one. I just was myself. I was a 14-year-old kid on a show, running around, getting in trouble, making people laugh,
right.
Sneaking out late at night, and trying to have a good time with his friends. So not a lot of acting involved, just memorization of lines.
You're one of the first people that I'm interviewing in my new podcast. You're also on the radio show. People are listening and watching now, but it's called Unshaken and Unafraid because people tried to censor me, tried to ghost ban me. The house was swatted with 6 sheriff's deputies showing up, 7 sheriff's deputies at 2:00 in the morning to try to shut me down. I wanted you on because they've been trying to do that to you for the longest time as well, but from a very different aspect. You were supposed to fit into a certain role, a certain stereotype of the Hollywood person who listens to the producers, listens to what Hollywood wants, listens to the progressive idiots that want to make this society a very different society than what you and I want as people who believe in the traditional American values. I wanted you on to talk about that in depth, but I realized coming into today, I didn't know how you began. How did you start as a 14-year-old? How did you get that job that launches you into superstardom almost overnight? Where you said you didn't want to be an actor. How does it happen?
Well, I was just a normal little kid with my 3 younger sisters living in an apartment in the suburbs of Los Angeles. And my mom was best friends with a lady whose son was on a show called 8 is Enough back in the 1980s. And she said, hey, you ought to go down and see this agent. Take your kids. Maybe some of them will be able to do a TV commercial or maybe get on a TV show. We live in Hollywood, Los Angeles, after all. So my mom did. The agent just thought she'd give me a chance, and I started auditioning and doing commercials for McDonald's and 409 Cleaner and Fruit Roll-Ups and Cocoa Puff cereal, and then eventually landed the role on Growing Pains as Mike Seaver. So that really took off, and within a couple of years, it was a big hit show. And then my sister Candace got on a show called Full House, and so our whole family was really swept up into this entertainment industry paradigm. And for us, fortunately, it turned out to be a good thing because we can export good values. God was very kind and gracious to us to pull us out of atheism and bring us into a deep faith in the Lord. And He's my North Star, and that's how I keep my moral compass set, and hopefully don't lose my way.
I get the feeling, and by the way, Kirk has a new major alternative to Disney Plus. It's called Brave Plus. We'll get into that in earnest in a second. And I just love that you're unafraid, and you're going to keep on bringing your values the way that they should be brought. But I get the feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, you get the job on Growing Pains. They don't know if you're going to be a big star or not. They don't know if it's going to stick, if it's going to take. Of course, it was a humongous deal. Was it 7-year run, something like that? And I get the feeling that in Hollywood they said, okay, here's just another guy, until you became somebody that, again, become part of the culture. People my age, watched you consistently. As I said, my sister sees you as like Elvis. So when that happens, is that when Hollywood says we've got to get our grips in him and make him do what we want? And that's when you go from, all right, do I have a value system or not? Do I do what they want to continue the riches? I guess the question is, was it a fork in the road? Once they saw how big you were becoming, did they want to take control of you even more? I get the feeling they did.
Yeah, I'd be speculating to say that I could get into the heads of the executives within the Hollywood industry. However, as a 17-year-old kid, I wasn't trying to mastermind anything. I was just trying to not embarrass myself as a teenager in front of my friends. And God did something in my heart. And all of a sudden, I wanted my life to be an expression of my gratitude for what he'd done for me through the gospel. And I began choosing different projects. And I look back now and realize that if anyone did have a vested interest in Mike Seaver going on to be a big money-making machine for the Hollywood industry, that is now all about showcasing pornography and twisted upside-down evil values,
right?
They view me as their prodigal child. Here, he was raised by his, by those within the industry. He was taught how we as the Hollywood family behave, and he went sideways. And he said, I'm going over here. And, the big difference is that when I came to my senses, unlike the prodigal child in the story that Jesus told, I came to my senses and said, my Hollywood industry is corrupt. I don't want to go back there. I've got the promised land in front of me over here, which is a place where I can actually advance what's true and what's good and beautiful. And I'm actually really encouraged to see what has been happening within the Hollywood industry, and people wanting to see more projects with morality and faith driving the storylines. I don't know if you see that, but I see that.
I do.
And projects like The Chosen, like the one I'm working on now, Iggy and Mr. Kirk, movies that are coming out. People are making a significant and meaningful shift back to the values that led to us being a strong, stable nation years ago.
KirkCameron.com. Go to the website now. And again, the new service is called Brave Plus. We'll get into that in earnest in a second. You mentioned 17. You also said you were an atheist. So what happens at 17? Do you have the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder whispering into your ear? Do you have temptation over here and traditional values that make more sense to you over there? What happens to where you go from, I don't believe in anything, to Jesus is my beacon? How does that happen?
Yeah, I like the way that you phrase that. Every teenager's got temptation on this side and temptation on this side. It's a pretty girl over here and it's a beer over here. And, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Right.
No matter which way you turn, you're going to get in trouble. What happened for me was I was chasing a pretty girl, and she led me to church.
Wow.
I was an atheist. I thought I would stick out like a sore thumb, but then I remembered I'm an actor. I could fake it. I could pretend like I was a Christian. And so I had no idea what I would experience. And that was the power of the gospel message. Some people hear the gospel and it just bounces right off of them, right? It's just like, they don't even register. And others, they think, hey, this is cool. I like this community. These people are nice to me. I think I'll join the club and wear the uniform. And then they fall away. And then there's others where the message penetrates and it takes root and it goes down deep. And that's just what happened to me. I can't explain it. I didn't check my brain at the door. In fact, I had 1,000 more questions about evolution, the Bible, about science, about other religions. What about Islam? What about Hinduism? How can you believe in a God you can't see? I want to be a doctor. I want to be a scientist. I don't want to be a guy who believes in fairy tales. And I came to the conclusion after my research and after all of my questioning that it required more faith for me to remain an atheist and believe that all this stuff happened by accident with no plan in mind, no design, no purpose, and that life just didn't make sense without the God of the Bible. And that's where the evidence led. And for the questions that I don't have answers to, that's where faith comes in and allows me to continue to move forward.
Well, what a great perspective. It takes more faith to not believe in anything than it takes to believe in something. I mean, I just, that's mind blowing. And I got as you were describing it, I almost pictured a wave of a grace or Christianity hitting you and sticking like a wave. The water will stick to you and it washes over you. Whereas you said very wisely, for some, it just bounces off. So for you, It wasn't being part of the club. It was just, okay, it looks like I'm in. Not only am I in, I got to find out more about this. And it started with a pretty girl. Is that your wife? Is that the same person?
No, different girl. My wife is far more beautiful. But
Good.
That girl was a sweet young lady who took me to church knowing that I had no faith. And yet there was a desire there to share something that she believed could change my life. And in fact, it did. So I became all in. And it wasn't about joining a club. I was already part of a bigger club. I was part of the Hollywood club. Then I couldn't care less about the youth group. And I didn't really like the uniform. I liked the clothes that I wore. And it was all about a relationship with God and understanding that at the end of the day, you and I are all headed for a 6-foot hole. We all die. And if we believe at the end of this road that all of it is essentially meaningless except for what makes you happy, well then life has no transcendent truth. There are no moral values that really mean something long term, and that nobody wants to live that way. It doesn't make any sense. So I embrace the gospel, and I believe today that my trust has been well placed.
It is Kirk Cameron, actor, producer, author, of course, KirkCameron.com. Go there. Brave Plus is coming soon. We're going to talk about that in earnest in a moment. I just love breaking stuff down with you because your perspective is so cool. I haven't lived through the Hollywood lifestyle. I've lived through broadcasting for 36 years, and there might be some parallels, but nothing like what you must have gone through as a 14-year-old child and then having the epiphany at 17 and then moving on in this very value-oriented life in a place that you have already mentioned in this interview. And you mentioned it to me before when we spoken, in a place where there weren't really values. The value system was disgusting and sordid and seedy and underhanded. How do you rise above that knowing, because as you get older, I'm guessing 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, you're going, wow, these people are nasty. These people are like the lowest form, some of them, who want to profit off of pornography or want to somehow expose children to things they shouldn't be exposed to. How do you make that realization? And how do you make that realization and say to yourself, I have to step away from this. I can't be part of this.
Yeah, I'm not that smart. I'm not a genius to have figured these things out. In fact, I don't even believe that I saved myself when it comes to finding God and rescuing myself from the typical demise of most teenage actors. Someone smarter than me, my pastor at the time, told me, he said, Kirk, remember, you didn't find God. He wasn't lost. You were, and he found you.
Yeah.
And he can find you in Hollywood. He can find you in Texas. He can find you in Africa. He can find you in Pakistan. And that, at the end of the day, is what guides me. It's not that I'm morally superior. I'm the worst sinner I know. I am more in need of forgiveness than my wife and my children, all combined. And when I think of the extent to which God went to provide for my acquittal, in that future court date when I stand before him, to pay the price for my moral deficiencies, I'm overwhelmed with gratitude. And I want that gratitude to be the attitude that maintains my positive altitude when I go through life, believing that good is going to win out over evil, and that false systems cannot stand forever. And being a part of what is true and good and beautiful is always worth it, because God will multiply what he loves. So that's my worldview and philosophy. It's much better and builds better worlds than socialists, Marxists, atheists, and secular humanists.
You know, it's okay to give yourself a little credit, because you did choose the pastor. You did choose to go to church that day, although it was a pretty girl that enticed you. I get it. But you did choose to not go on the easy path. The easy path would have been to be just as disgusting as many that we hear about in Hollywood. The easy path would have been to be godless and then really enjoy the riches while on planet Earth. So I give you the credit if you won't give it to yourself. It's Kirk Cameron, KirkCameron.com. Make sure you check out Brave Plus. And I do want to talk about that a lot, but I don't want to leave this for a second, because so much controversy lately over what's being shoved down our throats in places like Netflix and so on, even Disney. I mean, you always have to have X amount of gay characters or trans characters, and the princess in the movie that we liked in whatever the hell the Frost movie was, suddenly she's got to be a lesbian. If not, then that's not okay. We have to have trans people in the military, or else we're not inclusive. How do you continue to reject that? I know that I reject it, because I'm unafraid of that, and I left television news much for the same reason why you left Hollywood, because I couldn't have a say anymore. Now I can. But how do you reject that on a daily basis, knowing you saw early on, and I'm going to give you credit again, whereas you might not, but you saw early on the slow boil that was happening in Hollywood. It went from, can we get away with that? Maybe show a little bit of skin, maybe show a couple of girls kissing, and then all of a sudden it's full-blown, ridiculous, sordid activity on every show, in every movie, and there's got to be a certain amount. So how did you do that, where you seemed to be prescient about it? Was that God? Was that your pastor? Was it your wife? I mean, what was it about you that said, my radar is going off, this is going the wrong direction that I shouldn't be a part of, and maybe down the road I can make a new direction that brings us back to values?
Yeah, good question. I'm taking it one day at a time, and I want to make decisions that are going to honor God, honor my wife, honor my kids, and honor my country. So I believe that duty is ours to do what's right and to do what's good. Consequences are God's responsibility. If I do what's wrong, then the consequences are my responsibility. If I do the right thing over the long haul, I believe it leads to the best results. And God's faithful to make sure that those good results come about. And I know that because he promises it in his word, and I've experienced it in my own life as I look in the rearview mirror. What else can I say about that? At the end of the day, I can only do what I can do. I can't stop other people from being evil or wicked, and that's not my job. I like how Gandalf the Grey said it in Lord of the Rings, as he observed evil all around, and Frodo was frightened of all of it. Frodo was wondering, how in the world would they stop all of this evil? And he said, and there will be other evils that shall come, Frodo. For even Sauron is himself a servant or an emissary of a greater evil, yet it is not our task to master all the tides of the world, but rather to do what is in us for the help of those years wherein we are set, uprooting the evil in the fields we know, so that those who live after may have clean earth to till. What weather they shall have, Gandalf said, is not ours to rule.
Yeah.
I can't be there for my great-great-grandkids, but what I can do is I can uproot evil in the fields that I know, like in my family and in my world of work, like the entertainment and children's content space. And I can plant some seeds of truth, beauty, and goodness so that my descendants will have clean earth to build their life on. And if they're watching closely to Joe Pags and other men and women of faith and integrity who live out their values, they'll know how to deal with the spiritual storms and the moral tempests and the political hailstorms that come to them because they watched you. They were influenced by those who went before them. And so that's what I think we can do, and I try to do.
I love it. I just love the way, and thank you for the compliment. It's Kirk Cameron, kirkcameron.com. Go there right now. One last thing on this. Why didn't Hollywood realize that what you're launching now was necessary? We know that that Generation Z, in larger numbers than we've seen in a long time, is turning to Christianity. We know that a lot of them voted for President Trump because they wanted conservatism back in the White House and central government. They wanted more freedom, fewer regulations and smaller government. Why didn't Hollywood realize that? They seem to be pretty good predictors of what the trends are. Why didn't they realize that with all the smut they're pushing, if they pushed a very holy or a very family-friendly agenda, they might have profited big time. There are people who are dying to get the programming, the books, all the stuff that you're presenting now, and Hollywood didn't seem to see it coming. Why don't you think they saw this?
Well, it's mostly because because they don't want to see it, and because it makes them feel guilty, and because they're already getting paid by the sickos on the other side. So it's like, do you know somebody in your personal life, you got a friend, and it's like, no matter how much you show them the evidence of the truth, no matter how much you demonstrate to them that, diving into porn and alcohol and extortion, although it may be fun for you, is not going to take you down a road that gets you where you want to be.
Right.
And they just don't see it. It's like they're blind. Some people are just never going to see it. And at the end of the day, it's because they're having too much fun doing what they're doing, or they're making too much money. Or if they really said, I'm going to go down that way, they'd feel guilty because they've still got so many skeletons in the closet and stuff that they're doing on the side and moonlighting as a pervert and getting paid for it, that they just can't reconcile all of that. And so they continue to try to justify their darkness. And they go down that road until they hit a brick wall and they face plant, or somebody pulls the plug on their money and they're forced to do something different. I think that's why they hate Trump so much. There's personality issues. There's all sorts of moral arguments you could make about Trump and every other politician out there. But at the end of the day, he's disrupting so much, and he is forcing so much change that we've got to invent new ways of looking at the economy, at foreign relations, at entertainment, at the economy, and everything. And I think that that's a good thing, because sometimes you've got to let bad systems show themselves so that people recognize that this is a dead-end street, and then you start to dismantle those bad systems and replace them with good systems. And that's what I want to be a part of.
And you are, and you've been a part of it for a while. Brave Plus, we want to talk about it here. Before I do that, were you really named after Captain Kirk? Is that true?
That's the story my dad sticks with. And the other part of the story is that he was going to name my sister Spock.
Come on.
But I don't think that's true. So that makes me question the Captain Kirk thing, too.
Have you ever met William Shatner? You ever tell him that?
I did. I did meet him one time, yes.
Did you tell him that you were named after him?
Yes, I did tell him that I was named after him. I was very excited to tell him that.
Did he care?
You're pushing me to the end of the story. I didn't care, and I was very disappointed.
Well, you know what? I think that's a cool story. I hope that it's true. Even if it's not, it's still a cool story to tell. It is Kirk Cameron, Captain Kirk. Can I say? No, I shouldn't say that. Just call you Kirk Cameron.
I got a funny story. I had to pick out my grandpa name recently because I have a granddaughter, and now they live in Tennessee. Everyone's Peepaw, Papaw, Pawpaw, and that's just full Cracker Barrel, and I don't think I can do that. So I went with the title Chief.
Nice.
That's like
not
Chief.
bad.
You can call me Captain Kirk, or you could call me Chief Cameron. I don't know, whatever you like.
Kirk, it's not going to stick because I've got 2 grandkids now, and I promised my daughter CJ that her kids were going to call me Grandpags. Didn't stick. They called me Grandpa, G-Pa. One called me Joe the other day. Bailey called me Joe, and I said, no, you call me anything you want. You're never calling me Joe. That's not happening. But I get it. So we'll call you Chief as long as your grandkids stick. We'll see if that sticks. Let's talk about Brave Plus. Now, we've got Disney Plus, which is completely off the reservation. We've got Netflix that was pushing the most sexualized thing anybody's ever seen about 10, 11, 12-year-old girls. And we need something that it looks like you're going to be bringing. So is this out now? When can we get it? How do we get involved? What do we need to know about it?
Yeah. If I were the devil, I would take over Disney and just corrupt the minds of little kids.
Yes.
Right. And so what I've decided to do is that if I want to represent the good side, then I need to produce television programs that represent what is about faith, hope, and love. And that's what you're going to find at Brave Plus. It's not only my show, Iggy and Mr. Kirk, but over 50 shows that have been vetted by the team at Brave Plus to make sure that they're not overstimulating for your kids and going to make their ADD worse. They're not going to just confuse your children about gender, about their identity, and all that. These are good shows, classic shows like Bob the Builder, like Strawberry Shortcake, Davy and Goliath. I remember watching that show as a little kid. We've got my show, and new shows are being added all the time. It's just like Netflix. It's a network that you can go to and see shows that have been vetted by parents. Only 1 out of 20 shows make the cut. And so you can trust that they're going to be good for your kids and reinforce the moral values that you're trying to teach them.
And you don't have a DEI checklist where there's got to be a certain amount of gay, certain amount of trans, certain amount of confused, certain amount of drug use, certain amount of sex, none of that.
If there is any of that in those shows, they're not on Brave Plus. That they've all been filtered out.
Is it up and running now, or is it coming?
No, it's up and running right now. You can see it exclusively at Brave Plus. Just download the app on your phone, tablet, or TV. Brave Plus, that's where you get it. You can see the first 3 episodes for free, and then you can subscribe if you like it. Get ready, because your kids are going to like it. And we've filmed 2 seasons of episodes already, 20 episodes. And they're about the importance of family, kids telling the truth, being careful to trust their parents more than they trust their computers, the sanctity of life, First and Second Amendment, identity issues. All of these things are discussed and taught to kids in a way they can understand while having fun on Brave Plus.
It's Kirk Cameron. We appreciate the time and the access, Kirk. Go to kirkcameron.com. Download Brave Plus right now. I want to talk about intellectual property if we can. In what you do, there's intellectual property. Somebody wrote it. Somebody produced it. Somebody owns it. You wrote books. That's your book. Why do you think we've allowed places like China just to steal it historically for decades and decades, and we've done nothing about it? And now suddenly it looks like President Trump is trying to do something about that. Why do you think we've gotten to a place where we've never even put up a fight? We just, okay, they knocked us off, well, whatever. They're selling, VHS copies of Kirk's early movies and so on. Why do you think we haven't done more about it, and can we get ahead of it now?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's probably outside my realm of expertise and copyright laws and why we're not going after them in the legal system and all of that. However, usually when you follow the money, you figure out why people do what they do. And so when you say, why do we do that? Why do we let them do that? Well, I'm not even sure who we have been, because we've lost our national identity over the years. And it seems to be that there's so many bad actors in the financial spheres and the political spheres to where people are getting kickbacks, and American companies are going overseas so that they can bypass income tax and they can, keep the tariffs low by hiring lobbyists. And this is what Trump, I think, is trying to reverse, is to go back to the way America used to be when we had no income tax for Americans, except during an emergency like the Civil War or World War I, where there was 1% tax on the top 1% richest people, like the Carnegies or the Rothschilds. And we had tariffs that brought the vast majority of income to the United States, because that was fair for giving the rest of the world the world's greatest market to offer their products to.
Right.
We're the best customers in the whole world and buy more than the rest of the world. And people pay to sell T-shirts and hats at Dodger Stadium to have the privilege to sell to those customers.
Yes.
And tariffs are the same idea. The privilege of selling to the U.S. customer base is going to be paid for. And that's what funded us and had us in a state where we had the highest standard of living of anywhere in the world and the strongest economy. If all of the factors can come together to recreate that, I think we could be in a much healthier place long term than continuing to hike income tax to where everything's out of control, nobody can afford anything anymore, while our own company CEOs and owners simply just go get a house somewhere in Indonesia or in Mexico, and they make a killing and just let America sink.
It's a matter of incentivizing doing it here. Absolutely. And I see Hollywood is moving to Nashville. Hollywood is moving to Houston. People are getting smart in Hollywood, really good people. I don't mean the drudges of society, the dredges of society that have been running it for 100 years. I mean, people like, Dennis Quaid, people like, our friend Kevin Sorbo, people like you. You're not doing it in the traditional way, and you are bringing those jobs here. What I don't like is the inclusion of China, the influence of China in almost everything. I think most of the actual studios are owned, at least in part, if not wholly, by China. What do you think that's all about? Is that about undoing our traditional values here, to have China, an aggressive, agitator, infiltrate what you used to do?
Yeah, it could be. If you were trying to take down any nation, and particularly the West in America, the two big strongholds, the pillars of strength, are just what our founding fathers said that they were. These are the things we must protect above all things: faith and morality. George Washington said they're the two indispensable supports without which our nation cannot stand. Right. And so, yeah, if I were the devil and I had, no matter where I live, China or North Korea or anybody else, and I wanted to take down America, I would go after the family and I would go after the church. Those are the two strengths that have created our culture. And could be, I don't know. I don't have access to those levels of knowledge. I try to trace things back and say, who are the instigators? What is the source of the stream? Go all the way up and find out. And usually it's the people with the money and the power who are pushing an agenda to advance and benefit themselves. And that's why what we have as an American constitutional representative republic here in America is so precious and so rare. And, George Washington and the others exemplified what it meant to be good and virtuous. Were they perfect? No, of course not. But considering the context that they lived in, the successes and the advances that they made were exemplary and unique in all of the world. And I think that we have our time on the stage of the world right now to make advances that people will be talking about in history.
The name of his book is Born to be Brave, How to Be Part of America's Spiritual Comeback. It's Kirk Cameron. Go to kirkcameron.com. Download Brave Plus as well. I appreciate all the time and all the access. Let me ask you one last question, then I'd love to talk to you again soon. Thanks for coming on the program. Sure. Do you think that Western civilization is in a better place now than it was, say, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago? It seemed like we were on a downward slide. I just feel this resurgence for myself and for my family. Do you feel the same thing?
I think time will tell. I think that it sure appears that there is a shift. I mean, there's a change in the direction of the wind. And that's exciting, but we've seen superficial changes before when it's just a political change, right? Like the Democratic guy, that guy just tanked everything, so we're going Republican. And then you can have just as wicked a devils on the Republican side as anywhere else, and then it'll swing back the other way. But if we stop swinging left and right and we focus our attention to up instead of down, then we can head to our fullest potential under the law and under heaven's rules of right. And then I believe we're into real prosperity, real security, real wealth. And that's strong families, strong faith, and the economy and everything else will follow.
I think it's a very smart perspective. And here's why I say that, Kirk. And why I'm saying, because you just said it. But you had the big tech people show up at the inauguration. Suddenly you've got Mark Zuckerberg as a libertarian. Suddenly you've got, X is owned by Elon Musk, which is certainly a better platform than it used to be. But you've got the representatives from Google there, like YouTube suddenly is opening their eyes to the
Columbia University suddenly is they're dropping their DEI. Like, wow, wait a minute, everyone's been
Right. So I take your apprehension very, very seriously because I trust you for a minute, but now I've got to verify that what you're saying is true. So I guess the bottom line is this: we're in a better place, but is it going to stick?
Yeah, and only time will tell. It may stick, it may just pass us by, and I think the way to look at it is that you and I and those of us who are of similar mindsets, we have a 4-year window right now that is very unique in our lifetime. There is no one else who has provided opportunities right now like the president is opportunity for good men and women of faith and virtue to advance what is good and beautiful and true. Yes. And we have a responsibility to do it. We don't have to sit on the couch and cry in our Chick-fil-A soup, watching Fox News or Joe Pags or Newsmax thinking there's nothing that we can do. We've got 2 feet. We've got a mouth. We've got a backbone. We can stand up, speak up. We can lean in and run to the fight. And I believe that if we do that, our children will benefit from it. We've got to have faith and play the long game.
It's Kirk Cameron. Go to kirkcameron.com. Download Brave Plus right now. It's available, family-friendly, great programming. And also get his book, Born to be Brave, How to Be a Part of America's Spiritual Comeback. Kirk, I always appreciate the time and the access. I know that you're a very, very busy man. So anytime you've got time, make sure you come back and let's do it again, okay?
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate you. Keep up the great work. We need it.
Always appreciate you. Thank you so much. That's it for Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags. Unshaken and Unafraid. The next episode soon. We'll talk to you then.